Star Wars has been in a very dark place, a dirty place, not a whole lot to get excited about. A lot of contention regarding the Acolyte, not a lot of fanfare regarding Ahsoka before that. It's actually been 5 years since we've even gotten a Star Wars movie. It is a movie franchise, yet they don't seem to want to pull the trigger on actually doing a Star Wars movie. I do believe Solo and the reaction to that final Rise of Skywalker, especially I do believe the failing of Solo, a Star Wars story, and then certainly Rise of Skywalker, and before that even The Last Jedi really turned a lot of people off, and has Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm very, very reluctant to go in and actually make a movie. But it turns out if you would like Kathleen Kennedy gone, and I think a lot of Star Wars fans would love that, we're going to have to wait for a big movie likely. It sounds like she's ready to leave, but she wants to leave on a high note. We've got some rumors out there and a little information on what those high notes could be, because Disney actually announced that they have 3 dates in 2026 and 2027 that they are going to release Star Wars movies on. I'll believe it when I see it, but we will likely get at least one. Let's get into these rumors out there about Kathleen Kennedy and her eventual departure from Lucasfilm and what we can expect and when we can expect this to finally happen. Kathleen Kennedy apparently has something in common with much of the Star Wars fan base. She wants Kathleen Kennedy to leave Lucasfilm, but according to Film Thread's Chris Gore, she's only willing to walk out the door under one condition, namely, she wants to leave on the heels of a massive critical and commercial success. That's something Lucasfilm hasn't experienced in quite some time. Under Kennedy, the Star Wars franchise has gone from the most evergreen IP of all time to a sour note punching bag for YouTubers and streamers the world over. Certainly, it has become a bit of a joke. The Star Wars legacy is not what it used to be, and a lot of people can't even stand Star Wars anymore because of the lack of quality and the lack of respect for George Lucas and his vision of what the Jedi are and the Sith are and Star Wars is and all that kind of stuff. Me personally, I can still enjoy the original trilogy. I can still enjoy pieces of the prequel trilogy. I even still enjoy Rogue One. I still think that's a solid film. And, hey, I could probably even watch an Ewok movie, a Caravan of Courage or whatever, and probably still have a little nostalgia and feel goods about it. But for the most part, with the modern Star Wars stuff, it has become very, very difficult to even get excited about this stuff. And this rumor was already out there that Kathleen Kennedy wanted to leave Lucasfilm on a high note, and that's why she was going to stick around through that Indiana Jones movie, Dial of Destiny or whatever, thinking that was like bulletproof or something. And obviously that ended up losing more money than probably any project in the history of Lucasfilm. That was not a big-time winner, and just kind of blew up in her faces. It sounds like it wasn't that bad of a movie. I haven't even checked it out because I just think the Indiana Jones trilogy is perfect. And I think The Last Crusade is the perfect goodbye to Indiana Jones. I got through about 45 minutes of whatever that atrocity was, the 4th one, and then I haven't even checked out the 5th because I just kind of know what Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm are about, under Disney, and it's not about fans. It's not really about delivering anything good, except for a few abnormalities here and there, with Rogue One being an exception. A lot of people still do like the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, but the rumor was that if Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny blew up, she was going to leave. That did not work out, and now she's waiting for a big Star Wars success. And there are a few candidates out there because it sounds like there are actually going to be some movies. One of them is the most likely candidate to actually succeed. During Disney's Q3 earnings presentation, the company confirmed that 3 Star Wars films would be released in 2026 and 2027. The only specific title that was announced to fill one of those slots was The Mandalorian and Grou. However, the more notable takeaway from the announcement was most likely the fact that 3 Star Wars movies are still moving along and are planned to be released. The movie was announced in January, along with the confirmation that Disney and Lucasfilm were eyeing a May 2026 release date, that being The Mandalorian and Grou, which I don't know. If you're Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni and the brain trust at Lucasfilm, you're like, we have to have a movie that people at least enjoy and they want to go see and make some money. what is the one thing that we could do that hasn't really been ruined yet? And to a degree, maybe it's Mandalorian and Grogu, but it sounds like a lot of people hated the third season of The Mandalorian and aren't all about Grogu anymore. I don't think the merchandise even for Grogu is moving anymore. So they probably should have done this 4 years ago, 3 years ago, something like this. But that's the one project that they have in production and announced and all that stuff that likely has the best chance of success. And I do hope that it is successful if it means Kathleen Kennedy can finally bow out gracefully in her 70s and say, you know what, my career is what it is. It's still legendary. She was still a producer on so many amazing films. It's not even funny. Her tenure as president of Lucasfilm was a ginormous failure. And if it takes Mandalorian and Grogu to make some money and people to not hate it, to let her move on with her life and hand Star Wars over to somebody not Dave Filoni, I'm all for it. The problem is there have been so many Star Wars projects announced under Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm. We're still waiting for the Game of Thrones guys trilogy that they were going to do. Kevin Feige was going to do a Star Wars movie. Patty Jenkins was going to do like a Rogue Squadron movie. I think Rian Johnson had a trilogy that hasn't been canceled yet. We're supposed to get a Lando movie. There's so many of these stupid projects that have been greenlit and even announced, and a vast majority of them have never even seen the light of day. Even with stuff like, I think we're supposed to get a second season of Obi-Wan. Have you heard anything about that? I don't think that's happening. So it is hard to trust them when they say, yeah, we've got release dates in 2026 and 2027. And we even have an idea of what it's going to be, because it sounds like Kathleen Kennedy, or at least Lucasfilm under Kathleen Kennedy, can't make up their minds. They can't commit to a project. You know, even with Solo, it wasn't supposed to be a Ron Howard project. You know, it was supposed to be the dudes that did the Lego movie that everyone likes and all their movies are successful, that were the executive producers of the freaking Miles Morales Spider-Man movies. And she couldn't even stand those guys. I don't think she's a good judge of talent, and that's been one of the major problems. I imagine Mandalorian and Grogu will be successful if Jon Favreau is the guy in charge of it, because he made Mandalorian pretty damn good until it was stuffed full of other stuff that wasn't very good. But it also feels like it's too late. But if there's one of these ideas that'll do it, Mandalorian and Grogu is the one that has a chance. A little speculation on what the other two projects could be. Before The Mandalorian and Grogu was announced, the Rey movie was set to be the first Star Wars film to be released since The Rise of Skywalker, directed by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. The currently untitled Star Wars movie centered around Daisy Ridley's Rey and the start of a new Jedi Order. Since the Rey movie was previously marketed as the next Star Wars movie before The Mandalorian and Grogu was announced, it is safe to assume that it will fill the next slot in Star Wars release date, December 18th, 2026. That means that on December 17th, 2027, either Dave Filoni's crossover movie set in the Mandoverse or James Mangold's The Dawn of the Jedi will hit theaters. And those are not my assumptions. These are the assumptions of thedirect.com, where I'm gathering this information and the articles in question and the information that we do have. My assumption has been, since the day was announced, until this very moment, that the Rey movie will never see the light of day in theaters. They didn't hire an actual filmmaker. They hired a documentary filmmaker. It's completely different than sci-fi storytelling, big epic level, a huge storytelling on the scale of a Star Wars movie that's going to have tremendous amounts of CGI and real star power on it. If we ever see a Rey movie, and I don't think we will, it will be on Disney Plus. They will realize ahead of time that this thing is going to be an embarrassment. This was a terrible project, but I don't think it ever gets made. But they're assuming it's going to take the earlier date in late 2026. As far as the other two there, Dave Filoni is the chief creative officer of Lucasfilm. He certainly has a tremendous amount of power and probably some say over what's going to happen. I guess he's the Mandalorian guy now, but he's also the Ahsoka guy. And we've certainly seen the characters start showing up in each other's properties and whatnot. I imagine the Dave Filoni Mandoverse movie actually gets made. Well, I guess I could be less excited, because I'm certainly less excited for a Rey movie, but I don't think many people are just like, yeah, I want a Dave Filoni Mandoverse movie. And then with James Mangold, like The Dawn of the Jedi, which I think is a terrible idea. Of all the ideas, this is the worst idea to make a movie, but James Mangold has made good movies. You know, Logan's a solid film. There are some other things on his resume that are good, but he's also like built up for at least a couple of years. I know he's working on multiple projects. So when is James Mangold going to come in and actually okay the script and get done with the casting and get the movie out and, film it and post-production and all that kind of stuff. When's he going to have time to do that? He's already doing other stuff. So I imagine there's something else out there. Maybe we get the Patty Jenkins Rogue Squadron movie, which I would fucking love it. Hey, Rogue Squadron, give me some fucking Biggs in there. Give me some Wedge, you know what I mean? Not Biggs. Biggs is dead. I'm sorry. Biggs Darklighter is a true legend in the Star Wars universe, but, unfortunately he's no longer with us. But, give me some Rogue Squadron with Wedge at the helm, leading all that kind of stuff. And Patty Jenkins has had some success here and there. Obviously, that second Wonder Woman film kind of blew up in her face and didn't do very well. And now she's no longer doing DC stuff. So, or perhaps maybe we get another one of those things that was announced that, like the Taika Waititi Star Wars movie that I certainly don't want after Thor: Love and Thunder, or probably didn't want after Thor: Ragnarok, which is a movie a lot of people liked that I personally didn't. So there's a lot of wild cards out there. I don't think Rey is going to be one. I think the Mandoverse will likely be one of those two films if we end up getting three. But at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if they got one film out in 2026 and one out in 2027 if they were lucky. It has been 5 years since they made a movie. 2026 is still 2 years in the future. 7 years to make a movie, then we're going to expect them to come back in 12 months with another movie. I'll believe it when I see it. But based on the projects that have been announced and the stuff we know that is kind of sitting out there in the ether, I don't see any of these being the major success for Kathleen Kennedy to kind of walk out on a high note, unfortunately, because the sooner the better with Kathleen Kennedy, in my opinion. And we know it's not going to be the Acolyte. I know a lot of people are excited, or some people claim to be excited for an Acolyte season 2. Me personally, not so much. I got through 5 episodes. The 5th episode was perfectly acceptable. Wasn't worth it getting through the first 4 to get there personally. But there has been a lot of speculation about an Acolyte season 2. Less than a month after the Acolyte episode 8 dropped on Disney+, Star Wars audiences received their first unofficial update about the show's prospects. In a video on his YouTube channel, Christian Harloff shared, "There's no world where it's the Acolyte getting a season 2. Granted, this report isn't official. Harloff relayed the information from somebody that said they heard from somebody pretty close inside and warned fans to take the news with a grain of salt." Well, I hope it's more than a grain of salt. I hope this is confirmation that we're not getting an Acolyte season 2. I wish they would just have good ideas for Star Wars and bring in people that like Star Wars and wanted to make the coolest stuff in George Lucas's world that really honored through the traditions but was additive to it rather than destructive. And unfortunately, for the most part, the people that Kathleen Kennedy have brought in have been very, very destructive. With your Rian Johnsons, even J.J. Abrams to a degree, and certainly with your Leslie Headlands and stuff like that. And at this point, I find Dave Filoni to be terribly destructive. We hadn't seen Thrawn in live action and stuff like that, but Thrawn had been around for years and everybody had been waiting for him. When he brought him into Rebels and we see him in Ahsoka, he doesn't get Thrawn. Like, he kind of ruined what should have been a flagship villain for Star Wars that probably could have been a driving force in 2 or 3 films, but he doesn't know what he's doing. And that's kind of the biggest problem with Star Wars right now. You have a lot of people that don't like what Star Wars represents, don't understand what it represents, want to change what it represents. So you have this weird mishmash, schizophrenic version of Star Wars that has nothing really to do with George Lucas's vision, that's just out there trying to find a new identity under Kathleen Kennedy, and none of them taken, unfortunately. So for me, hopefully the Mandalorian and Grou comes out on time. It's a big hit, even if superficially, and Kathleen Kennedy is able to walk out the door and say that she had a success on Star Wars. It will be the only real success because Star Wars is a fucking movie franchise, and they've kind of broken that one. Although, admittedly, that sequel trilogy at least did make money. It didn't do the solo numbers, but it also did kill off the brand and interest in it. So you gotta think about it in more levels than just one. Did it make money? But was it destructive? Did it turn people off? And it certainly did that. If you would like more Star Wars talk, we're more of a comic book channel here, but I still have such a love and adoration for George Lucas and Star Wars. We do cover it, but we also cover a lot of toy news with Star Wars. But you have to go over to Think Critical Patreon to check that out, and the bonus content on some of our awesome podcasts, specifically the Geek Fix with Aaron Sparrow. If you haven't checked that out, go over to the Patreon. There's a link in the video description. Check out what we have to offer. See if it's for you. and you can expect a lot more Star Wars content and conversations over there as well.